Shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahushai, Bahasham, Recha Kodash. Double honors to the elders and the apostles of Great Millstone, and peace and blessings to the elect. And today we're going to go into the book of 2nd Maccabees, the 10th chapter. Now Maccabeus and his company, the Lord guiding them, recovered the temple and the city. But the altars which the heathen had built in the open street, and also the chapels, they pulled down. And having cleansed the temple, they made another altar, and striking stones, they took fire out of them. Basically, when you make fire by smiting stones against each other to get that spark, and offered a sacrifice after 2 years, and set forth incense and lights and shewbread. So they basically cleaned up the temple and everything. When that was done, they fell flat down and besought the Lord that they might come no more into such troubles. But if they sinned any more against him, that he himself would chasten them with mercy, and that they might not be delivered onto the blasphemous and barbarous nations. So they basically begged the Lord to say, look, if we've transgressed any more, you judge us by your hands, because you'll be merciful unto us. Don't give us into the hand of these wild, merciless nations. Kind of like what David said when after he had numbered Israel, and the Lord said, you got to choose one of these plagues, right? He chose rather to fall into the hands of the Lord than into the hands of man. Now upon the same day that the strangers profaned the temple, on the very day, or the very same day, it was cleansed again. Even the 25th day of the same month, which is Caslu. So 2 years ago, that same day is when the strangers and wicked Israelites and so on, right, at the behest of Antiochus, polluted the temple, profaned it, and now 2 years later, that same day, it was cleansed. And they kept the 8 days with gladness, as in the Feast of Tabernacles, remembering, this is from the dedication, right? They kept it like basically of a long duration, right? Similar to how the Feast of Tabernacles is, I believe, for about 7 days or so. Remembering that not long afore they had held the Feast of the Tabernacles, when as they wandered in the mountains and dens like beasts, right? Because they were glad in dedicating the temple or rededicating the temple, and remembered how not too long ago they had to keep the Feast of Tabernacles in the mountains and dens because they were on the run, because the enemies had control over their habitations and dwelling places. Therefore they bare branches and fair boughs and palms also, and sung psalms unto him that had given them good success in cleansing his place, being the Most High. They ordained also by a common statute and decree that every year those days should be kept of the whole nation of the Jews. Right? So every year those days of celebration for that rededication should be kept. Hence you have the feast of dedication. And this was the end of Antiochus, called Epiphanes. Now we will declare the acts of Antiochus Eupator, who was the son of this wicked man, gathering briefly the calamities of the wars. So when he was come to the crown, he set one Lysias over the affairs of his realm. So Lysias, who was like a tutor unto him, you could say, right? He put in this position of basically being or like a governor of his realm, or an overseer of all his stuff, and appointed him his chief governor of Syria and Phoenice. For Ptolemaeus, that was called Macron, choosing rather to do justice unto the Jews for the wrong that had been done unto them, endeavored to continue peace with them. So he decided, after all the wicked things that were done to us, to deal peaceably with us. Whereupon, being accused of the king's friends before Eupator, so that would mean he would basically not be on board with things that would be in the ill favor of the Jews. So eventually, the king's friends, probably not liking that too well, they accused him, right? They accused Ptolemaeus, gave him a bad name and a bad rep, a bad taste in the king's mouth, and called traitor at every word, because he had left Cyprus, that Philometor, had committed unto him, and departed to Antiochus Epiphanes. So they're basically saying, look, you can't trust this guy. When Ptolemy entrusted him with Cyprus, he ended up switching sides to Antiochus' side. And seeing that he was in no honorable place, he was so discouraged that he poisoned himself and died. But when Georgius was governor of the holds, which are the strongholds, he hired soldiers and nourished war continually with the Jews. So now here comes another demon. So he comes up and he's constantly warring with us. And therewithal the Idumeans, having gotten into their hands the most commodious holds, basically advantageous strongholds or fortresses, kept the Jews occupied, and receiving those that were banished from Jerusalem, they went about to nourish war. So they basically accepted all the outcasts and so on from Jerusalem, and as it says, they went about to nourish war. Nourish war meaning to start wars and to continually war with us. Then they that were with Maccabees made supplication and besought God that he would be their helper. And so they ran with violence upon the strongholds of the Idumeans. And assaulting them strongly, they won the holds, and kept off all that fought upon the wall, and slew all that fell into their hands, and killed no fewer than 20,000. And because certain, who were no less than 9,000, were fled together into two very strong castles, having all manner of things convenient to sustain the siege. So there were a few, about 9,000, who fled into strong fortresses, having like provisions and stuff that would help them sustain a siege. Maccabees left Simon and Joseph, and Zacchaeus also, and them that were with him, who were enough to besiege them, right? Enough to besiege those two strong castles. So he left them in charge to do that, and departed himself onto those places which more needed his help. Now they that were with Simon, led by covetousness, were persuaded for money through certain of those that were in the castle. So you had some people in the castle that bribed, right, some of those that were on a part of Simon's men, and took 70,000 drachms and let some of them escape. So they released some of them, through that bribe. But when it was told Maccabeus what was done, he called the governors of the people together and accused those men that they had sold their brethren for money, and set their enemies free to fight against them. Because he's basically saying, look, these are the people trying to kill us, and you just let them go for money. So you basically just jeoparded or sold the lives of your brethren, any that they would kill, for money. So he slew those that were found traitors, and immediately took the two castles. And having good success with his weapons, in all things he took in hand, he slew in the two holds more than 20,000. So whatever weapon he picked up, he was good with it. And he slew them. What was it? It was more than 20,000. Damn. Now Timotheus, whom the Jews had overcome before, when he had gathered a great multitude of foreign forces and horses out of Asia, not a few, came as though he would take Jewry by force of arms. So this guy comes back again with an even larger army. But when he drew near, they that were with Maccabeus turned themselves to pray unto God, and sprinkled earth upon their heads, and girded their loins with sackcloth. So as Timotheus approached, Judas and his men basically were praying to the Lord, right, making supplication to him, and fell down at the foot of the altar and besought him to be merciful to them, and to be an enemy to their enemies, and an adversary to their adversaries, as the law declareth. So just like it's written in the law, in the Torah, that the Lord would be an enemy to our enemies. So after the prayer, they took their weapons and went on further from the city. And when they drew near to their enemies, they kept by themselves. Now the sun, being newly risen, they joined both together, the one part having together with their virtue, their refuge also unto the Lord for a pledge. So you had Judas's army, right? They had their weapons, but they had above that their refuge and their virtue and their trust in the Lord for a pledge of their success and victory. The other side making their rage leader of their battle. So the side of Timotheus were coming in there, basically just, angry, enraged. But when the battle waxed strong, there appeared unto the enemies from heaven 5 comely men upon horses, and these were angels, with bridles of gold, and 2 of them led the Jews. So you had 5 men that appeared, and you can tell like their appearance. All right, they have gold armor, probably shining. 2 of them led the Jews in the war, and took betwixt them and covered, or took Maccabees, which is Judas, betwixt them and covered him on every side, weapons, and kept him safe. So on each side of him, you had the angels that were basically guarding, as they're in the war, but shot arrows and lightnings against their enemies. So these were actually angels fighting in a war with us against our enemies. So that being confounded with blindness and full of trouble, they were killed, being our enemies. Imagine that you on a battlefield and you see angels just manifest down there. What's going on here? These men in gold, probably much bigger, stronger, throwing freaking Zeus type lightning bolts at you. It says, and there were slain of footmen 20,500 and 600 horsemen. As for Timotheus himself, he fled into a very stronghold, called Gara, where Charias was governor. But they that were with Maccabees laid siege against the fortress courageously 4 days. And they that were within, trusting to the strength of the place, blasphemed exceedingly and uttered wicked words. So they, being proud, thinking, oh, nah, ain't no way, this fortress, ain't nobody getting through this. They started getting comfortable and talking proudly and wickedly. Nevertheless, upon the 5th day, early, 20 young men of Maccabeus' company, inflamed with anger, so they got pissed at the inflammatory words these proud demons were saying from within their stronghold, because of the blasphemies, assaulted the wall manly, and with a fierce courage killed all that they met withal. So they were able to force their way through, kill through all the defenses of the enemy, and make it into the city, or the hold. Others likewise ascending after them, whilst they were busied with them that were within, burnt the towers, and kindling fires burnt the blasphemers alive. And others broke open the gates, and having received in the rest of the army, took the city. Okay, so they basically made a way through, and the others followed suit, and overtook those of the hold, and ended up taking out those blasphemers, and killed Timotheus that was hid in a certain pit, and Charias his brother with Apollophanes. When this was done, they, they praised the Lord with psalms and thanksgiving, who had done so great things for Israel and given them the victory. And that brings us to the end of the book of 2 Maccabees, 10th chapter. Lord willing, thou edifying to the elect. In closing, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham Yahushai, Bahasham Rechak Kodash. And until next time, Shalom.